Hello and welcome to the Bartholomew School GCSE English Literature Revision video focusing on how to answer the first longer unseen poetry question for English Literature Paper 2. Before we start properly, you need to make sure that you have in front of you your GCSE English Literature Revision booklet, a highlighter, a pen and some paper. So before we go any further, you might want to pause the video and make sure that you have those things to hand. This video will focus on Practice Question 1 Part A from the Unseen Poetry Practice Questions in your booklet. It's the one called A Poison Tree by William Blake. In an exam situation, the first thing that you need to do is look really closely at the question, so let's do that now with a highlighter. The first thing to notice is the phrase feelings about anger. This should prevent us from writing everything we notice about the poem and give us a focus for our response. We're just looking for feelings about anger. Next, notice that the question uses the words how and present. This tells us that we need to focus our answer on the techniques and methods that Blake uses. We should write about language, structure and form and use technical vocabulary in our answer to show that we're doing this. And then thirdly, notice that the question uses the word poet. In this case, the poet is Blake. If we can use his name in our answer, we'll demonstrate that we understand that the poem is a literary construction and that the writer has intentions. So let's turn to the poem itself. I'm going to read it aloud and you need to follow, and with your highlighter pick out words, phrases and techniques that you think you could say something interesting about. And remember that the focus of the question is feelings about anger. I was angry with my friend, I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe, I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles, and with soft deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning, glad I see, my foe outstretched beneath the tree. The first thing that you notice in this poem is the imagery of gardens and gardening. Anger is presented as being something that grows like a plant. There is a lexical field of words related to botany, that is, plants. You could describe this as an extended metaphor, or talk about the lexical field, or both. The point is that the poet presents feelings about anger as things that grow if they are allowed to. Secondly, I might identify the phrase, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles. Words like sunned and soft suggest that the speaker is taking care to nurture his feelings of anger. He's presented on a superficial level, at least, as being proud of his feelings of anger, and this is supported by that last line, or the penultimate line rather, glad I see. However, I might also infer from the repetition of my foe throughout, in contrast to the first line, my friend, that at a deeper level, the speaker is ashamed of the results of his feelings of anger. The word foe means enemy, and the use of the possessive pronoun my perhaps implies that the speaker is taking responsibility for his feelings of anger and the damage that it does to the other person. In the second line, we learn that if the feelings of anger, the speaker's wrath, had been spoken about, it could have ended. Instead, the poem ends with the foe being outstretched beneath the tree, metaphorically killed by the speaker's feelings of anger. We could read this as a poem about guilt at harbouring anger. I could add to this a point about form. The poem is written with a strong sense of the speaker's persona, which we can see by looking at the repeated use of the personal pronoun I. We might infer from this that, again, the speaker is taking responsibility for his feelings of anger. There's a sense of self-destructiveness in his anger, as well as the destruction of his foe. Structurally, I'd want to draw attention to the repeated use of the word and at the beginnings of lines. If you want to sound particularly impressive, it might interest you to know that the repeated use of the word and is called polysyndeton. Anyway, this technique imitates the building up of the speaker's feelings of anger. It's like an ever-growing list. You might have highlighted other things, and that is completely fine as long as you can write interestingly about those quotations in relation to feelings about anger. So each of those ideas could form the basis of a paragraph in my response. You might not have time to write everything, so I'd suggest you prioritise. If you are aiming for a level 6 or above, a great idea is to structure your argument around the idea of what is superficially suggested on the surface, and then what might be being explored at a deeper level. You could set this up in a brief introduction and conclusion. Let's have a look at what a paragraph would look like written up into an essay form. At a superficial level, Blake seems to be suggesting that the speaker is proud of his feelings of anger. For instance, he writes about having sunned his anger with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. The metaphor of sunning the tree that represents his anger has connotations of happiness and care. Just as the sun nurtures the plants, so the speaker nurtures and cares for his anger to make it grow until it becomes poisonous. The nouns smiles and wiles, meaning manipulative strategies, suggest that the speaker is masking his feelings of anger with a pretense of kindness towards his foe, and the contradictory adjectives soft and deceitful reveal the difference between how the speaker is acting and what he is really like underneath. The idea that he takes pride in this cruelty and deception is supported by the penultimate line where he is glad to see his foe suffering. In the poem, he is dead as a result of his built-up feelings of anger. The use of the present tense in the phrase glad I see suggests that he might remain glad even now. However, at a deeper level, Blake seems to be suggesting that harbouring feelings of anger can corrupt a person, and then I'd go on to explore that in more detail. So you can see in this paragraph that I have given a response to the question in my first sentence. I'm showing a higher order skill by offering multiple interpretations. In my next paragraph, I'll suggest that the poem has several layers of meaning. Notice too that I stick carefully to the question using the words anger and feelings of anger throughout. The main bulk of my answer, you should see, is analysis. I've used technical terms and I've dealt in detail with a number of quotations. Analysis makes the absolute bulk of the marks for this. So this answer should take you 35 minutes to write. You can look back at any part of this video to help you with the planning and use your revision booklet to remind you of what you're being marked on. You can have a go at writing your response and hand it to your teacher for some feedback. Then you can try the other unseen questions for the part 1 part in the booklet using exactly the same method as we've done today. Thank you very much for watching, and good luck with your response.